The first lie was the easiest. It fell from Juniper's lips like a petal from a dying flower, soft and inevitable. It was not a grand, premeditated falsehood, but a desperate, instinctual thing, born in the blue and red strobe of police lights and the cold grip of terror that had been her constant companion since Orion Vance had blown into her life. "He was with me," she whispered to the officer, her voice frayed at the edges. Her hands trembled so violently she had to clutch the rough fabric of her jeans to still them. "All night, Orion was with me." The officer, a tired-looking man with a kind face and weary eyes, nodded, his pen scratching against the notepad. The question had been simple. Where was Orion Vance on the night of October 26th, between the hours of 9 p.m. and 1 a.m.? The body of a local lowlife, a man named Silas, had been found in a ditch on the outskirts of their dead-end town, a bullet in his chest and his pockets turned inside out. Silas had enemies, a long list of them, but Orion's name had bubbled to the top. There was a history, a public shouting match just days before over a disputed debt, a debt Orion claimed Silas owed him for a favor that lived in the shadows. Orion, standing beside her on the porch of her tiny rented house, did not flinch. He simply placed a heavy, warm hand on Juniper's shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be reassuring but felt more like an anchor, pulling her deeper into the churning waters of her deception. His silence was a language she had become fluent in. It said, "Thank you, now see it through." And she did. Because for Juniper, loving Orion Vance was a fundamental law of her universe, as undeniable as gravity. It was a force that had pulled her from the periphery of her own life and placed her squarely in the eye of a hurricane. They had met 2 years ago at the Dusty Spur, the only bar in town that didn't card too closely. Juniper was there under duress, dragged by a coworker who insisted she needed to live a little. She was perched on a stool, nursing a soda and lime, feeling like a ghost in a room full of shouting, living bodies. When he walked in, Orion Vance didn't enter a room. He occupied it. The air pressure seemed to change, the noise dimming by a few decibels. He was all dark, brooding intensity, lean and corded with muscle from a life of hard work and harder luck. His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, scanned the room and landed on her. He'd seen her, the quiet, bookish girl from the wrong side of the tracks, the one who mended clothes at the tailor's and always had her nose in a novel, and he had looked at her as if she were the only person there. He bought her a drink. He didn't smile much, but when he did, it was a rare, devastating event that seemed to rewrite the geometry of his face. He talked to her about things no one else ever had: his dream of buying back his family's lost farmland, his contempt for the small-mindedness of the town, the poetry he secretly read but would never admit to. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the depth of feeling she kept locked away, and he called it forth. He called her forth. "You're too good for this place, Juniper," he'd say, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her bones. "You're like a diamond in a coal mine. They don't see your worth, but I do. You're my sanctuary, my only good thing." And she had believed him. She, who had always felt invisible, was suddenly the center of a brilliant, consuming star. Their love was never a gentle thing. It was a forest fire, all-consuming and dangerous. He was a storm cloud of a man, all coiled anger and ambition with no outlet. He got into fights, his temper a flash fire that could ignite over a sideways glance. He had a history with the law: minor stuff, disorderly conduct, public drunkenness, a bar stool shattered over a perceived insult. But to Juniper, these were not red flags. They were proof of his passionate, misunderstood soul. He was a wild creature, and she was the one who could gentle him. Her love would be his redemption. So when he showed up at her door on the night of October 26th, just after 11 p.m., his knuckles raw and bleeding, his eyes wild with a feral energy that made her blood run cold, she didn't hesitate. She pulled him inside, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He reeked of gunpowder, cheap whiskey, and the metallic tang of fear. He hadn't spoken, just collapsed onto her sofa, burying his face in his hands. She'd brought a bowl of warm water and a clean cloth, her hands steady as she gently cleaned the broken skin on his knuckles. The water in the bowl bloomed pink. "Orion," she'd whispered, her voice trembling. "What happened?" He'd finally looked up, his eyes haunted. "Silas," he choked out. "It was self-defense, Junie. He came at me. We argued about the money. He pulled a knife. I had to. He'd clung to her then, burying his face in her neck, his body shaking. And she had held him, her mind racing, her world narrowing to this single terrifying point. She believed him. She had to. To do otherwise would be to admit that the foundation upon which she had built her entire happiness was rotten. So, when the police came knocking, the lie was already there, waiting. It was a seed of self-preservation, watered by her love and her fear. In the days that followed, she built the alibi with meticulous, heartbreaking detail for the detectives who followed. She sat in a sterile, beige interview room, a female detective named Valdez, watching her with unnervingly perceptive eyes. "Walk me through the evening again, Miss Hayes," Detective Valdez would say, her voice calm and non-judgmental. And Juniper would. She described the movie they'd streamed, a forgettable romantic comedy she'd chosen, one he'd teased her about, the Chinese food they'd eaten. He always got the extra spicy kung pao, and she could still feel the phantom burn of the peppers on her own tongue. The exact time he'd left her apartment, just after midnight, he'd kissed her goodbye at the door, a long, lingering kiss that now felt like a brand. She created a whole mundane evening out of the thin, toxic air of her fear. She painted a portrait of a quiet, domestic Orion, a man curled on her sofa, his head in her lap, a man who couldn't possibly be capable of murder. She perjured herself with a quiet conviction that surprised her. She looked Detective Valdez directly in the face and swore to the fiction. She thought of Silas, of his family, and a bolt of shame so violent it made her nauseous would shoot through her. But then she would picture Orion in a prison jumpsuit, his spirit broken, and she would lock the shame away in a deep, dark chamber of her heart. She was saving him. That was all that mattered. The case against Orion, built on circumstantial evidence and no murder weapon, slowly crumbled. Without Juniper's alibi, it would have been flimsy. With it, it was untenable. The charges were dropped. The day he was officially in the clear, he came to her tiny apartment, swept her into his arms, and spun her around. "My Junie," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick with an emotion that felt like victory. "My brave, beautiful girl. You saved me." For a few fleeting months, it felt like that salvation was mutual. He was softer, gentler. The constant tension in his shoulders seemed to ease. He got a job at Boyd's Auto Repair, his clever hands finally finding honest work, cleaning engines instead of staining them with blood and dirt. He came home smelling of grease and gasoline, and to Juniper, it was the scent of absolution. He brought her flowers, daisies, her favorite, not because they were expensive, but because he remembered she liked the way they looked like little suns. He talked about the future, a small house with a porch swing, a dog, maybe even kids. He'd curl up with her at night and trace the lines of her palm, talking about taking her to see the ocean, a thing she'd only ever read about. They were the golden months, a beautiful, gilded lie perched precariously on the foundation of her first terrible one. Juniper allowed herself to believe the worst was over. She had weathered the storm, and the sun was finally breaking through. She started sleeping through the night again. The image of Silas's body, which her mind had conjured in grisly detail, began to fade. She was building a new truth, a beautiful one, and she clung to it with all her strength. But storms have a way of circling back. The change started so subtly she almost missed it. A missed dinner here, a vague excuse about working late, a forgotten promise to fix the leaky faucet that turned into a week of its incessant dripping. He started spending time with old friends, men like Cale and Jet, with shifty eyes and quick tempers, men she thought he'd left behind. The scent of whiskey returned, first as a faint whisper on his breath when he came to bed, then as a constant cloud around him. The gentle mechanic was receding, and the old Orion, the one forged in resentment and violence, was clawing his way back to the surface. The talk of the future ceased. The daisy stopped. The man who traced her palm now often sat in silence, staring at the wall, his jaw working, a storm brewing behind his eyes. One evening, he came home, his movements sharp and aggressive. He tossed a folded newspaper onto the kitchen table where Juniper was preparing dinner. The plates rattled. "Seen this?" It was the local Gazette. A small article on page 3 was circled in angry, slashing red ink. It detailed the reopening of the Silas investigation, citing newly uncovered evidence. The article quoted Detective Valdez, who stated, "We are committed to finding justice for the victim, no matter how long it takes. No case is ever truly closed." Juniper's heart hammered against her ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. She wiped her hands on her apron, her mouth gone dry. What? New evidence? Orion's eyes were dark pits of paranoia. "How the hell should I know?" he snarled. "But your little performance must not have been as convincing as we thought." Your performance. The word was a shard of ice plunged directly into her heart. The shared burden, the secret they had carried together, was now her sole failure. The pressure began to build inside him. A kettle on the verge of a scream. He became consumed with the idea that the police were watching the apartment. He'd stare out the window for hours, peering through the blinds, his body a tense line of readiness. He started questioning her with a new, sharp-edged intensity. Where had she gone that day? Who had she talked to at the grocery store? Had that same dark sedan been parked down the street? Had anyone at all, asked her about that night again? "No, Orion," she'd say, her voice small, trying to shrink herself out of his line of fire. "No one. I told you, it's fine." "You'd tell me, right, Junie?" he'd ask, his grip on her arm a little too tight, leaving faint bruises that bloomed like ugly flowers on her skin. "You wouldn't lie to me. Not after everything." The irony was a bitter pill she had to swallow every day. Her entire life was a lie she had built for him. The breaking point, the true end of them, came on a Tuesday. It was raining, a cold, relentless drizzle that blurred the world outside and matched the desolation growing within her. Orion had been fired from Boyd's for showing up drunk and getting into a fist fight with the foreman. He was pacing their small living room like a caged animal, a bottle of whiskey in his hand, the contents sloshing with each furious turn. A knock came at the door, not a friendly tap, but an insistent, authoritative rap that echoed in the tense silence. Orion froze, his eyes locking with Juniper's. A silent, desperate communication passed between them. "Don't you dare." Her legs felt like water as she walked to the door and opened it. Detective Valdez stood on the porch, her coat beaded with rain, her expression unreadable. Another, larger officer stood a few steps behind her. "Miss Hayes, we need to ask you a few more questions about the Silas homicide," Valdez said, her voice calm but firm. "We'd like you to come down to the station." Juniper's throat closed. She could feel Orion's gaze burning into her back. "Now? I already told you everything I know." Her voice was a pathetic squeak. "New information has come to light," the detective said, her gaze steady and unnerving. "It would be in your best interest to cooperate." From behind her, Orion's voice cut through the air, deceptively calm. "She's not going anywhere without her lawyer." The detective's eyes shifted past Juniper to Orion. "That's your right, Mr. Vance. We'll be in touch." She handed Juniper a card. It was stiff, white, official. "Call me when you're ready to have a conversation, Miss Hayes. The truth has a way of coming out, eventually. It's always better if it comes from you." When the door clicked shut, the silence in the apartment was absolute and suffocating. Juniper stood with her back to Orion, the detective's card feeling like a live coal in her hand. The rain tapped against the window like 1,000 accusing fingers. "What new information?" Orion's voice was a low rumble, the calm before the eruption. "I don't know," she whispered, her back still to him. "They're bluffing. They have to be." He came up behind her, so close she could feel the heat and the anger radiating from his body. "But they're sniffing around because of you. They think you're the weak link." She turned to face him, a spark of defiance igniting in her chest for the first time in months. What are you talking about? Your performance, Juniper? The crying, the trembling hands? You were too convincing as the scared little girlfriend. They think they can break you. He grabbed her shoulders, his fingers digging into her flesh with a bruising force. But you won't break. You will not say a word. Do you understand me? Tears welled in her eyes, born of physical pain and a dawning, horrific realization. This wasn't about them against the world anymore. This was about him against her. Orion, you told me it was self-defense. You told me. The words were a plea, a last desperate attempt to grasp the man she thought she'd saved. His expression shifted, the mask of the wronged man slipping completely to reveal something colder, harder, and utterly terrifying. "And you believed me," he said, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You were so desperate to believe your bad boy wasn't really a monster, so eager to play the saint saving the sinner, that you swallowed the whole story without a second thought. That's on you, Junie." The world tilted on its axis. The room, their life, the golden memories, it all crumbled to dust around her. The leaky faucet's drip sounded like a death knell. "What are you saying?" Her voice was barely audible. "I'm saying Silas was on his knees, begging," Orion hissed, his face inches from hers. His breath was sour with whiskey and malice. "I'm saying he didn't have a knife. I'm saying I put that bullet in him because he disrespected me, because he thought he could laugh in my face and walk away. And you—" He let out a short, ugly laugh that held no humor, only contempt. "You handed me my get-out-of-jail-free card. You were so eager to be my savior." The truth was a physical blow. It stole the air from her lungs and the strength from her legs. She slumped against the wall, sliding down to the floor. The carefully constructed reality she had lived in for the past year shattered, and the shards ripped her to pieces. She had built her life, her very identity, on the foundation of his lie. She had defended a cold-blooded killer. She had looked the parents of a dead man in the eye, in her mind, and told them their son's murderer was innocent. The weight of it was crushing, a moral debt she could never repay. "I can't," she sobbed, wrapping her arms around her knees, making herself small. "I can't do this anymore." His eyes narrowed, the predator seeing the prey break. "You can, and you will. You're in this as deep as I am. You lied to the police. You obstructed justice. That's a felony, Juniper. You go back on your story now, and you'll go to prison right alongside me. You think they'll go easy on you? The grieving family? They'll see you as the bitch who let their son's killer walk free. Is that what you want?" He had trapped her, completely and utterly. Her love, her loyalty, her desperate act of salvation, he had weaponized all of it. She was no longer his sanctuary. She was his shield, and he would hold her up until she shattered. The next few weeks were a descent into a special kind of hell. Orion became her jailer. He quit his job entirely, spending his days at home, watching her. He took her phone, monitoring her calls, reading her text messages. He drove her to and from her waitressing job, sitting in the parking lot in his beat-up truck for the entire duration of her shift. If she was 5 minutes late coming out, he would be in the diner, his presence a dark cloud, his questions sharp and accusing. Her tips dried up. The regulars were scared of him. He isolated her completely. When her friend from work, Maya, called the house phone to check on her, Orion answered. Juniper listened from the hallway, her heart in her throat, as his voice, all false charm, dripped with poison. "She's fine, Maya. Just tired. Yeah, the whole police thing really took it out of her. You know how it is. Yeah, I'm taking good care of her. She doesn't really want to talk to anyone right now. It's best if you just give her some space." He hung up and turned to Juniper, his expression flat. She won't be calling again. Her once vibrant spirit was systematically extinguished. The light in her eyes, the one he had always claimed to love, guttered and died. She moved through her life like a ghost, hollowed out by fear and a bottomless well of regret. She was utterly alone, tethered to the man who was destroying her, the man whose touch now made her skin crawl, whose voice was a trigger for a nausea that was becoming constant. The final act of his destruction was not one of violence, but of calculated, soul-deep cruelty. The police, unable to build a new case without a recanted statement or physical evidence, officially closed the Silas file for the second and final time. The threat was gone. Orion was truly, finally free. That night, he came home in a triumphant, swaggering mood. He had been out celebrating with Kale and Jet. He smelled of beer and victory. He didn't even look at her as he walked past the sofa where she sat, a book unopened in her lap. He went to the bedroom, and she heard the closet door open, the sound of hangers scraping along the rod. A cold dread, colder than anything she had felt before, began to seep into her bones. She stood and walked to the bedroom doorway. He was packing a duffel bag, tossing his few belongings into it with a casual finality that stole the breath from her lungs. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice a hollow echo in the small room. He zipped the bag shut with a violent, decisive sound and looked at her. And for the first time, there was no pretense, no mask of the lover, the victim, or even the jailer. There was only a chilling emptiness in his gaze, the void where his soul should have been. "Away. This town is dead to me, and so are you." She stared at him, uncomprehending. The words didn't make sense. After all of it, the lie, the fear, the isolation, this was the conclusion? What about me? The question was pathetic, but it was all she had. He laughed, a short, derisive sound that scraped against her raw nerves. "What about you? You served your purpose, Juniper. You think I could stay with you? Look at you." His eyes raked over her, from her unwashed hair to her trembling hands, and his expression was one of pure disgust. "You're a shell, a walking, talking reminder of the whole ugly mess. Being with you is like living in a tomb. It's suffocating." Each word was a precise, surgical strike, aimed at the last vestiges of her heart, her self-worth, her very humanity. He had used up all her love, all her loyalty, all her courage, and now he was discarding the empty container. He was tossing her onto the pile of his used-up things. "You used me," she whispered, the truth of it finally, fully dawning, a sunrise of absolute horror. "You let yourself be used," he corrected, slinging the bag over his shoulder. He brushed past her as if she were a piece of furniture. "There's a difference. You wanted a project. You wanted to fix the broken man. You wanted to be the heroine of your own tragic romance. Well, you did. You fixed me so well I don't need you anymore. I'm free, and you're just collateral damage." He walked to the front door without a backward glance. He didn't take a single memento, not the photograph of them at the county fair, not the sweater she'd knitted for him during those golden months. It was as if he were leaving a rented room, his stay finally over, the terms of the lease fulfilled in the most brutal way imaginable. "They'll come for you," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength, the last ember of her spirit sparking in the vast desolation he left in his wake. It was a futile threat, but it was all she had left. "When I tell them the truth." He paused at the door, his hand on the knob, and looked back. A smirk, the most terrifying expression she had ever seen on his face, twisted his handsome features into something monstrous. "Go ahead, Junie. Tell them," he said softly, almost kindly. "You walk into that police station and you recant your statement, and the first thing they'll do is arrest you for perjury and obstruction of justice. You'll be the one who goes to prison. The grieving parents?" He shook his head, a parody of pity. "They'll hate you more than they ever hated me. I'm the monster they always expected. But you? You're the one who looked them in the eye and lied. You're the one who let their son's killer walk free. You're not the victim here, Juniper. You're the accomplice." He opened the door, and the damp, indifferent night air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and decay. "Have a nice life." The door clicked shut. The sound was as final as a coffin lid closing. Juniper stood in the middle of the room they had shared, the room where she had built a life on a lie, where she had dreamed of a future that was now ash. He hadn't just left her. He had annihilated her. He had taken her love and twisted it into a noose. He had taken her truth and made it a weapon against her. He had taken her future and sealed it in a prison of her own making. She was utterly, completely destroyed, not by the loss of him, but by the horrifying understanding of what she had enabled, what she had become. She sank to the floor, the cold hardwood seeping through her clothes. The silence was deafening, a physical presence pressing in on her from all sides. There were no tears left. There was only a vast, empty landscape of ruin. She was free of him, but the chains he had forged were now internal. She was a prisoner in a cage of her own construction, and the sentence was a lifetime. The wind howled outside, a lonely, desperate sound. And Juniper Hayes, the accomplice, wrapped her arms around herself and began the long, cold vigil with her grief. She was 24 years old, and her life was over. He was gone, but he had taken everything that mattered, leaving behind only the chilling echo of his truth and the crushing, inescapable weight of hers.